Jacob Thorne had been alone for 7 years. 7 long years since his wife died in childbirth, taking their unborn son with her. He was 41 now, and his ranch outside of Redemption, Texas had become both his sanctuary and his prison. The townsfolk whispered about him, the hermit rancher who barely came to town except for supplies, who'd let grief turn him into a ghost of the man he'd once been. The day Catherine Miller arrived in Redemption, Jacob was in the general store, his quarterly trip for essentials. He noticed her immediately, not because she was beautiful, though she was, but because of the profound sadness in her eyes. A sadness he recognized like looking in a mirror. She was young, maybe 24, dressed in black mourning clothes that had seen better days. And she moved through the store with the careful precision of someone trying very hard to hold themselves together. "Widow Miller," the storekeeper said, his voice carrying that false sympathy small-town gossip's perfect. "Heard you're looking for work. Not much call for a woman alone, I'm afraid." Jacob watched her shoulders tense, watched her hands grip her small purse tighter. "I can cook, clean, mend. I'm a hard worker, Mr. Patterson. My husband's death left me with nothing but debts." "Shame about that accident," Patterson replied, not sounding sympathetic at all. "Mining's dangerous work. Still, don't know who'd hire a young widow. People talk, you know." Something in Jacob's chest tightened with anger. He knew exactly what Patterson meant. The cruel assumptions people made, the judgments passed on those already suffering. Before he could stop himself, he stepped forward. "I need a housekeeper," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "If Mrs. Miller is interested." Catherine turned to him, those sad eyes widening with surprise. Up close, he could see the exhaustion etched into her young face, the desperation she was trying to hide. Yes, I'm very interested, Mr. Thorne. Jacob Thorne. I have a ranch about 5 miles out. The work's honest and I pay fair. You'd have your own room, 3 meals a day." Patterson frowned, clearly wanting to say something, but Jacob's reputation for being disagreeable kept him silent. Catherine looked at Jacob like he'd just thrown her a rope while she was drowning. "When can I start?" she asked quietly. "Today, if you're able." That's how Catherine Miller came to live at the Thorne Ranch, and how 2 broken people began the slow process of healing each other without even realizing it. At first, they moved around each other like careful strangers. Catherine cleaned the house that had fallen into disrepair, cooked meals that actually tasted like food instead of fuel. Jacob worked the ranch from dawn to dusk, speaking only when necessary, though he found himself coming in earlier each evening, drawn by the warm light in the windows and the smell of home-cooked meals. Weeks passed, then months. Slowly, carefully, they began to talk. Catherine spoke of her husband, Samuel, who died in a mining collapse just 8 months after their wedding. She'd loved him, she said, but theirs had been a practical marriage more than a passionate one. 2 lonely people finding comfort in companionship. Jacob told her about Emma, his wife, about the son he'd never gotten to hold, about how guilt and grief had hollowed him out. "Do you think we're being punished?" Catherine asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "For not being good enough, strong enough." Jacob considered this, surprised by how much her question affected him. "No," he said finally. "I think life just happens, good and bad, without reason sometimes. But I think we punish ourselves worse than any God ever could." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and something passed between them. Understanding, recognition. The walls they'd both built began to crack. It happened on a cold November night. Catherine had caught a chill, and Jacob insisted she rest while he made dinner. His clumsy attempts at cooking made her laugh, the first real laugh he'd heard from her, and the sound did something to his heart. When he brought her tea, their hands touched, and suddenly they were looking at each other differently. The loneliness that had defined them both became unbearable in the face of this unexpected connection. Neither of them planned what happened next. It was gentle and desperate all at once. 2 people reaching for warmth in the darkness, seeking comfort in the simplest human connection. Afterward, lying in the quiet, Catherine cried, and Jacob held her, and they both knew everything had changed. They married quietly 2 weeks later, both knowing the town would gossip, both past caring. Jacob felt alive for the first time in 7 years. Catherine smiled more, the haunted look in her eyes gradually fading. They worked together, building something new from the broken pieces of their past lives. When Catherine discovered she was pregnant 3 months later, Jacob felt joy crash over him like a wave, immediately followed by crushing fear. The memories of Emma's death, the blood, the helpless terror, all came rushing back. Catherine saw the fear in his eyes and took his hands in hers. "I'm scared too," she admitted. "But we're not the same people we were. We've already survived the worst. Maybe we can survive this together." The pregnancy progressed, and with each passing month, Jacob's fear warred with his growing hope. He hired the best doctor in the territory, prepared everything obsessively, and prayed to a God he'd stopped believing in years ago. Catherine remained calm, rubbing her growing belly and talking to their child about the ranch, about second chances, about how sometimes love comes when you least expect it. The labor was long and difficult. Jacob paced outside the room like a caged animal, every scream from Catherine sending him back to that horrible night 7 years ago. When the doctor finally emerged, Jacob couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only wait for the words that would either save him or destroy him completely. "Congratulations, Mr. Thorne. You have a healthy daughter. And your wife is tired but perfectly fine." Jacob's knees nearly buckled. He stumbled into the room where Catherine lay exhausted, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in soft blankets. She looked up at him with tears streaming down her face, and he saw in her eyes everything he felt: relief, joy, gratitude, love. "Meet Emma Catherine Thorne," she whispered, "named for the ones we lost, and for the second chance we found." Jacob took his daughter in his trembling hands, this tiny, perfect miracle, and finally let himself cry. All the grief, all the fear, all the years of loneliness poured out of him. Catherine reached for his hand, and together they formed something he'd thought impossible: a family. But that night, as Catherine slept and Jacob held his daughter by the window watching the stars, she stirred and whispered something that would change everything he thought he understood. "Jacob," Catherine said softly, "there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you before, but I was afraid." He turned to her, his heart suddenly racing. "What is it?" "Samuel, my husband. The mining accident." She took a shaky breath. "It wasn't an accident. He took his own life. He'd been gambling, lost everything, including money that wasn't his. He was going to prison, and he couldn't face it. He left me with his debts and his shame, and I—" She started to cry. "I was angry at him for so long. Angry that he was a coward. Angry that he left me to clean up his mess. When I met you, when I saw how much guilt you carried for something that wasn't your fault, I realized I'd been carrying guilt too. Guilt for being angry at a dead man, for being relieved sometimes that I was free of him." Jacob set the baby gently in her cradle and went to Catherine, pulling her into his arms. "We've both been carrying ghosts," he said. "But maybe that's done now. Maybe we can just carry each other." She clung to him, and he felt the last of his walls crumble completely. They'd both been drowning in the past, both convinced they didn't deserve happiness. But somehow, impossibly, they'd found each other. Two broken people who'd made each other whole. The scandal the town expected never materialized because everyone could see what Jacob and Catherine had built. A real home, a real family, a love that was all the more powerful because they'd both known its absence. The lonely rancher and the young widow had found more than comfort in each other. They'd found redemption, hope, and the courage to believe that the past didn't have to define the future. Years later, when little Emma asked how her parents met, Jacob and Catherine would share a look, remembering the pain that had brought them together, the healing they'd found in each other's arms. And they'd tell her the truth in the way that mattered most, that sometimes love doesn't arrive with fireworks and grand gestures. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in the middle of grief, offering not to erase the past, but to build something beautiful alongside it. And that's the truest kind of love there is.